But the ROTC as we know it today, or as we knew it yesterday, really is the product of the period after the First World War. It began in 1919-20, and by 1928, if my memory is correct, there were maybe about 325 units across the country, churning out about 6,000 second lieutenants each year. The Navy came later. In 1925, Congress enacted a very modest program for Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps. It limited by statute to 1,200 midshipmen in any single year. 6 institutions were selected. I've never really found out just why these institutions were chosen. 2 of them along the East Coast, Harvard and Yale. I suppose they have some academic distinction. 2 along the West Coast, the University of California at Berkeley and the University of Washington in Seattle. There are fine Puget Sound and naval facilities in the San Francisco Bay Area. If you're wondering why UCLA wasn't selected, it was just in its beginning stage. 2 others, one in the South, Georgia Tech, a public institution, and the other, Northwestern University, a private institution. I'm told, I've never seen it documented, that there was a race between Northwestern and Michigan for the Middle Western institution. I have to assume that Northwestern won out because of its proximity to Great Lakes. But there again, I can't be sure of that fact. At Northwestern, when the first midshipman appeared on the campus in the fall of 1926, there was already an Army ROTC unit. It had been here since 1919-20. It was flourishing. I suppose they were commissioning something like 25 or 30 second lieutenants each fall. The president of the university, Walter Dill Scott, after whom Scott Hall is named, was a little wary of having 2 units on the campus. He wondered whether there would be a sufficient clientele for supporting 2 ROTC units. And actually, he proved to be correct in his worry, because almost as soon as the Navy boys appeared, the Army enrollment began to drop. And it is not without significance that the very first year that the first class was commissioned in June of 1930, the Army withdrew because it had fallen below the required 100 cadets to be operative. Now, I'd like to just try to give you some notion of what the unit was like in those days. As Matt Olson has pointed out, I was not here at that time. All that I know, I've learned from reading old yearbooks, talking with graduates who had been here. Last June, Captain Anderson and I were privileged to attend the luncheon of the class of 1940, which was holding its 50th reunion, and the NROTC unit had a very lively and interesting discussion of their days. Of course, the class of 1940 went almost immediately into active service because of the outbreak of the Second World War. Another source of information, if any of you are interested, and I can't believe you are, another source of information is a study that was done by a former midshipman in connection with the plaque, and I'll come back to that plaque that lists the midshipmen who had been killed in the Second World War. A very useful piece of research in which he described the undergraduate career of the, he said, 23 people whose names are on the plaque in their undergraduate days. What strikes me looking back is, first, of course, it was a reserve officer training corps. There were no scholarships. You did not go on active duty upon commissioning. Your sole obligation after commissioning, unless you were called up in a national emergency, your sole obligation was a 2-week summer cruise. There was some subsistence for the second and first classmen, but again, I often wonder why people were so eager to join at a time when, to the best of my recollection, and I was in college graduating in 1933 and teaching in the next years, when so many of the American youth of that period were absolutely opposed to any intervention in a Second World War. I can remember at the Harvard commencement in 1941, or at the Harvard class day in 1941, the president of the university was booed by the undergraduate body because he spoke in behalf of taking steps that would have brought the United States into the war prior to Pearl Harbor on the side of England. The unit at that time did not have any fancy headquarters. They had a little brick building that's long since gone along the lake, and they were constantly asking for more space, which is a familiar refrain by almost every P&S who ever served here. I think that's all that needs to be said about the Reserve Officer Training Corps during the period prior to 1941. The statistics show that they commissioned anywhere from 30 to 40 Marines first, second lieutenants and ensigns each year. And the number was fairly steady. With the outbreak of the Second World War, there was a tremendous transformation. The NROTC unit remained here. The numbers grew so that the class of 1943, which was graduated in February and commissioned then rather than in June, was well above the 40 figure. But there were other things going on the Evanston-Chicago campus that are worthy of note. Let me go back a little bit. I said that originally there were 6 NROTC units with a limit of 1,200 statutory. In 1937, as I remember, Congress lifted that and jumped it to 2,400, which meant a couple more NROTC units. And by 1940, there were some 27 NROTC units producing ensigns and second lieutenants. The Navy needed much more than the NROTC, however, during the Second World War. And one of their first steps was to establish what they called a midshipman school. These were for people who had already graduated from college and who were, for good reasons or other, eager to serve in the armed forces. The first of the two were at Columbia University in New York. They used an old battleship, the Prairie State. The second was at Northwestern on the Chicago campus, where the Navy took over a brand new building, Abbott Hall, which had been designed for the law school and the business school, which was then on the downtown campus. And it was there that John F. Kennedy, Harvard class of 1940, received his commission at Northwestern University in 1941. In addition to the midshipman school on the downtown campus, there were a variety of other schools on the campus, a radio operator school and some specialized.